So the standards were fuzzy, and that's what they mean when they say fuzzy. You read the standard and you see it, you don't really know what it means. Of course, that led to a wide variety of fuzzy curriculum. But even worse, it led to a fuzzy standardized exam that teachers really couldn't teach to or ensure that students were learning what would be on the exam, because it was impossible to tell from the standard what you would teach or what might show up on the exam. Before I talk about the new standards, I just quickly want to go through a couple of things about that, the WASL. We know that the WASL is not a difficult exam. If you look at the exam, as the A+ Commission did and achieved in 2004, and basically what they said about that test is that the math tests covered what students in many other countries generally learn in middle school. So we knew it was not a high standard, but this was really struck me when I read this. It's not the high level of content that's making this test difficult for students, because the content demands are relatively low. There has to be other factors going into what's making the test challenging. Bingo, there are other factors. It wasn't the test, it's not the test. It's the standards that we had did not direct teachers to teach what's on the test, because they did not direct teachers towards any common target. That's really the problem. That's been the problem. So I don't have time really to go through this, but I would encourage you to go to the OSBI site and look at the WASL release problems, and you'll see one like this, and then you'll see the GLEs that it is tied to that generated that question. And the thing that will strike you is, well, I would have never guessed in a million years that this standard would have led to that problem. And that is exactly what really the issue has been on the WASL. It's been a disconnect of the standards. So, we needed to get new standards, and, we've accomplished that. I wish that the standards were stronger. They're certainly an improvement. It wasn't really that difficult to make that happen. I took the liberty of assigning my own grades, since I assign grades every day. They were an F. I now give them a C. I've studied them, and I helped write them. So basically, though, some of the problems we have with the new standards, there's too much content. They can't be covered in 1 year. As we put those standards together, everybody kept adding things in. We said, well, don't worry, we'll cut later. Of course, nothing got cut later. And so it's really impossible to do everything in those standards in 1 year. The other thing is the order of content models reform curriculum, so it makes them lean a particular direction. But that's really not what bothers me the most. They're not world class. They keep us behind top international standards, and that was disappointing, because we set out to try to match Singapore or Japan or Korea or India or China. They're really not up to those standards. But still, the biggest problem for us is they still lack clarity in some areas. They don't ensure that teachers will teach the same content in all cases. They're a lot better, but here's a couple of examples. I won't go through all of these, but this is from Algebra 1. Select and justify functions and equations to model and solve problems. Well, the thing is, the new standards have not what they call examples, but explanations. But the problem is that the explanations aren't part of the standard, and you can't be sure that what's in the explanation will actually be assessed. You're not sure what will be assessed. And that really is the problem that we have now. That's been the problem on the WASL. It's not that teachers can't teach middle school math, or it's not that our kids couldn't pass those. It's the disconnect between what is being taught and what kids need to learn. So you can see those. Again, I'm not going to go through all of them because there's just many of them. I encourage you to read them yourself. You can see them on the OSBI website. And lastly, the process strands, of which these are, they don't really have examples with them. Make valid inferences and draw conclusions based on data. Again, how do you assess that? How is a teacher, what is teacher A going to teach with regard to that? What is teacher B going to teach? They're not going to teach the same thing because there's no connection. And so that's problematic and needs to be cleaned up if possible. Fortunately, we are going to go to end-of-course assessments, which will replace the WASL in 10th grade. That's a good thing, as long as we get a good assessment. I am concerned about that because there's potential for low-level assessment. There's potential for this standard and assessment disconnect. And so, but at least it limits it to a certain target. So what can you do? One thing, I think you should demand that your children be offered authentic algebra. Authentic algebra is defined in the National Math Panel's final report, which you can Google. And I have to say, vote for change. We have an election coming up. We all have a say. We need to change directions. Demand clear standards that are comparable to top international standards. We still need to meet that goal. With things that are happening in the world right now, that becomes more important than ever. Let SBE, State Board of Education, know that you support the strategic teaching report and you want mathematically coherent standards and curriculum. That's all I have for you. Thank you.